Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me once again. Today, I would like to share one of the most inspiring stories in Canadian history. A story about courage, determination, and hope. At just 22 years old, Terry Fox would become one of the most admired people in Canada. Millions of people would learn his name, and generations would continue to remember his journey long after his lifetime. Yet before he became a national hero, Terry was simply an ordinary young boy with a love for sports and a determination that set him apart from others. Growing up in Canada, Terry enjoyed many of the same activities as other children his age. He loved being active, spending time outdoors, and competing in sports. Although he was not the biggest or most naturally gifted athlete, he possessed an attitude that would eventually define his entire life. Whenever someone told him something could not be done, Terry became even more determined to prove them wrong. This mindset appeared early in his school years. He especially loved basketball, but many people believed he was too small to compete successfully. Rather than accepting their opinion, Terry spent countless hours practicing and improving. He worked harder than most people around him, slowly transforming himself into a capable athlete. Friends, teachers, and coaches began noticing that Terry rarely quit when things became difficult. Challenges seemed to motivate him instead of discouraging him. As he grew older, this relentless determination became one of his strongest qualities. After high school, Terry attended Simon Fraser University and continued pursuing his passion for sports. Like many young adults, he was focused on building a future filled with opportunities, friendships, and personal goals. Life seemed full of possibilities. Nothing suggested that his future would soon take an unexpected and heartbreaking turn. Then, during his late teenage years, Terry began feeling pain in his right leg. At first, it seemed like the kind of injury athletes experience all the time. He assumed it would eventually disappear. Instead, the pain continued growing worse. Day after day, it became harder to ignore. What seemed like a small problem was slowly becoming something far more serious. Neither Terry nor his family could have imagined that this pain would soon lead to a diagnosis that would change the course of his life forever and place him on a path that would ultimately inspire an entire nation. The pain in Terry's leg continued to grow worse. What had once seemed like a minor sports injury gradually became impossible to ignore. Running became difficult. Walking became painful. Concerned about his condition, Terry visited doctors and underwent a series of medical tests. He was only 18 years old, healthy, athletic, and full of plans for the future. Cancer was the last thing anyone expected. Then came the devastating news. Doctors discovered that Terry had osteogenic sarcoma, a rare and aggressive form of bone cancer located near his right knee. For Terry and his family, the diagnosis was shocking. In a single moment, everything changed. The future he had imagined suddenly became uncertain. Instead of focusing on sports, education, and everyday life, he now faced a battle that would determine whether he lived or died. The doctors explained that immediate action was necessary. The cancer was dangerous and could spread throughout his body. To give him the best chance of survival, his right leg would need to be amputated above the knee. For a young man who loved sports, the news felt almost impossible to accept. Athletics had always been a major part of his identity. The idea of losing a leg seemed unimaginable. Yet there was little time to think. Only a few days after receiving the diagnosis, Terry underwent surgery. When he woke up, his life had changed forever. The physical recovery was difficult, But the emotional challenge was even greater. Terry was forced to confront fears and uncertainties that most people never experience at such a young age. There were moments of frustration, sadness, and doubt. However, something inside him refused to surrender. Even during the darkest days, Terry maintained the determination that had always defined his character. While recovering in the hospital, he spent time surrounded by other cancer patients. Some were much younger than he was. He saw children fighting the same disease with incredible courage. He witnessed the pain that cancer brought not only to patients but also to their families. Those experiences left a deep impression on him. Gradually, Terry stopped focusing only on what cancer had taken away from him and began thinking about the struggles of others. The more he observed, the more he felt a growing desire to help. He began asking himself a simple but powerful question: if he survived this battle, could he use his experience to make a difference? At the time, he had no idea that this question would eventually lead to one of the most extraordinary journeys in Canadian history. Before Terry could inspire a nation, however, he would first need to accomplish something many people believed was impossible. He would have to learn how to live, compete, and dream again with only one leg. Life after the surgery was far from easy. Terry now faced challenges that most people never have to imagine. Simple tasks that had once been automatic suddenly required effort, patience, and determination. Learning to walk with an artificial leg was painful and frustrating. Every step felt unnatural. Some days were better than others, but progress came slowly. Many people in Terry's situation would have accepted a quieter life and lowered their expectations for the future. Terry thought differently. He refused to let cancer define who he was. Instead, he focused on what he could still do rather than what he had lost. During his recovery, he often reflected on the cancer patients he had met in the hospital, especially the children whose courage had deeply inspired him. Their faces stayed in his memory long after he returned home. The more he thought about them, the more he wanted to do something meaningful. Around this time, Terry read an article about Dick Traum, an amputee who had completed the New York City Marathon. The story immediately captured his attention. For the first time, Terry realized that losing a leg did not necessarily mean the end of an active life. If another amputee could run a marathon, perhaps he could too. What began as a simple idea soon became a personal challenge. Terry started training. The process was incredibly difficult. Running with an artificial leg caused pain with nearly every stride. His body absorbed constant impact, and many days ended with exhaustion and discomfort. Friends and family admired his determination, but some people questioned whether he was pushing himself too hard. Others believed his goal was unrealistic. Terry listened politely, but he continued training. Early mornings, long runs, and endless repetition became part of his daily routine. Slowly, he became stronger. More importantly, his dream became larger. At first, Terry wanted to prove to himself that he could still run. Then he began thinking about something much bigger. He remembered the suffering he had witnessed in the hospital and the thousands of Canadians affected by cancer every year. He wanted to help them. He wanted to raise awareness and support cancer research so that future patients might have a better chance than those he had seen. Gradually, an extraordinary idea began to take shape. Terry decided he would attempt to run across Canada. The journey would cover thousands of kilometers, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Most people considered the idea impossible. Even healthy athletes rarely attempted such a challenge. Yet Terry believed that if his story could inspire people to donate even a single dollar toward cancer research, every painful step would be worth it. The dream sounded unbelievable, but for Terry Fox, it was becoming a mission, and soon, he would take the first step in a journey that would capture the attention of an entire nation. W 1979, Terry Fox had fully committed himself to an idea that most people considered impossible. Running across Canada was not simply a physical challenge. It was a mission to raise awareness and money for cancer research. Terry believed that every Canadian could contribute just $1 to help fight the disease. If enough people joined together, millions of dollars could be raised. The goal was ambitious, but Terry had never been interested in easy goals. Before beginning his journey, he spent months training. He ran through rain, cold weather, exhaustion, and pain, day after day. He pushed his body beyond its limits. Running with an artificial leg was far more difficult than most people realized. Each step created a unique rhythm. As the artificial limb struck the ground, the movement was uncomfortable, repetitive, and physically demanding, yet Terry continued, because he knew that the real challenge had not even started. He also worked tirelessly to find sponsors and attract support for his project, which he called the Marathon of Hope. At first, very few people showed interest. Companies declined sponsorship requests. Media organizations paid little attention. Many people admired his determination but doubted that he could actually succeed. Terry faced rejection after rejection. Still, he refused to abandon the dream. Eventually, with support from a small group of believers, including his family and close friends, the Marathon of Hope became a reality. On April 1980, Terry stood at St. John's, Newfoundland, beside the Atlantic Ocean. Before him stretched an enormous country and thousands of kilometers of road. Few people were present to witness the moment. There were no massive crowds, no national celebrations, and no guarantees of success. Terry dipped his artificial leg into the Atlantic Ocean and filled 2 bottles with seawater. One bottle would remain with him during the journey. The other, he hoped, would one day be poured into the Pacific Ocean after he completed the run. Then he began moving forward, step by step, kilometer by kilometer. Terry started running west across Canada. The early days were difficult. Some communities barely noticed him. Donations arrived slowly. There were moments when it seemed as though the entire effort might fail before it truly began. Yet Terry had already learned something important throughout his battle with cancer. Success did not come from perfect conditions. It came from refusing to stop. Every morning, he woke up and ran. Every evening, he rested and prepared to do it again the next day. What began as the journey of one determined young man was slowly becoming something larger. Canadians were beginning to hear his story. Newspapers started paying attention. More people stopped to watch. More donations arrived. The Marathon of Hope had begun. And although few realized it at the time, the country was about to witness one of the most inspiring movements in its history. As the weeks passed, Terry Fox continued running across Canada with remarkable determination. Every day followed a demanding routine. He would wake up early in the morning, put on his artificial leg, and begin running. He often covered more than 40 kilometers each day, roughly the distance of a marathon. The physical toll was enormous. His artificial leg frequently caused pain, blisters, and bleeding. Strong winds, rain, cold temperatures, and traffic added even more difficulty to an already exhausting challenge. Yet Terry rarely complained. He remained focused on the purpose behind every step. In the beginning, many communities knew little about the Marathon of Hope. Some people waved as he passed. Others donated a few dollars. Local newspapers occasionally mentioned his journey, but national attention remained limited. Terry's goal of raising $1 from every Canadian still seemed far away. There were moments when the donations were disappointing and the crowds were small. For many people, such setbacks would have been discouraging. Terry viewed them differently. He understood that meaningful change often takes time. Instead of focusing on what he had not achieved, he concentrated on the next kilometer, the next town, and the next opportunity to share his message. Gradually, something began to change. More journalists started covering the story. Radio stations discussed his progress. Television crews arrived to document his journey. Canadians were beginning to learn about the young man running across the country on one artificial leg to fight cancer. The more people heard about Terry, the more they were inspired by his determination. Donations increased. Crowds grew larger. Schools invited him to speak. Community leaders welcomed him as he entered their towns. Everywhere he went, people saw not just an athlete, but a symbol of courage and hope. Terry's message was simple yet powerful. Cancer affected countless families, and he wanted Canadians to unite in support of research that could save lives. His sincerity resonated with people because they knew his story was real. He was not seeking fame or personal gain. He was running for those who could not. By the time Terry reached Ontario, the Marathon of Hope had become a national story. Thousands of people lined roads to cheer for him. Donations arrived from across the country. Children, parents, cancer survivors, and complete strangers all found inspiration in his journey. What had started as the dream of one determined young man was becoming a movement that connected Canadians from coast to coast. Yet despite the growing success, Terry was facing a challenge that no one could see. Deep inside his body, the disease he thought he had defeated was preparing to change everything once again. By the late summer of 1980, Terry Fox had become one of the most recognized people in Canada. Newspapers followed his progress daily. Television crews documented his journey. Crowds gathered along highways, in schools, and in town centers to cheer for him as he passed. Donations continued to grow, and the Marathon of Hope was succeeding beyond what many people had imagined. Yet despite the growing attention, Terry remained focused on his mission. Every morning he continued the same routine. He woke up, prepared himself for another day of running, and pushed forward one step at a time. He rarely spoke about his own discomfort. Instead, he encouraged Canadians to remember the people who were still fighting cancer. The journey was never about Terry alone. It was about creating hope for others. By this point, he had already run thousands of kilometers, an achievement that many professional athletes would consider extraordinary. However, the immense physical strain was beginning to take a toll on his body. Terry occasionally experienced unusual fatigue and discomfort. At first, he believed it was simply the result of months of intense running. After all, few people had ever attempted anything remotely similar. He continued moving forward despite the warning signs. Then, on September 2, 1980, while running near Thunder Bay, Ontario, Terry began experiencing severe pain in his chest. Breathing became difficult. His energy suddenly disappeared. For the first time since the Marathon of Hope had begun, he was unable to continue. Medical examinations quickly revealed devastating news. The cancer had returned. Worse still, it had spread to his lungs. The disease he thought he had overcome was now threatening his life once again. The announcement shocked the entire country. Canadians who had followed his journey for months could hardly believe it. Only one day earlier, Terry had been running toward his dream. Now he was being forced to stop. On September 2, surrounded by reporters and supporters, Terry made the heartbreaking decision to end the marathon of hope. Standing before the cameras, he explained that he could not continue because of his health. Yet even during one of the most difficult moments of his life, his focus remained on the cause. He expressed hope that Canadians would continue supporting cancer research and helping those affected by the disease. His words touched millions of people across Canada. People felt as though a friend had received terrible news. The young man who had inspired a nation now needed the nation's support. In return, donations began increasing at an incredible rate. Communities organized fundraising events. Schools collected money. Businesses contributed. Canadians were determined to ensure that Terry's dream would not end simply because he could no longer run. Although the marathon of hope had stopped, something far bigger had already begun. And in the months ahead, Canada would unite in a way that few people could have imagined. The news of Terry's condition spread across Canada with incredible speed. For months, Canadians had watched him run through rain, wind, exhaustion, and pain. They had followed his journey from the Atlantic coast and celebrated every milestone along the way. Now the country faced a heartbreaking reality. Terry Fox could no longer continue his run, and he was once again fighting for his life. Yet something remarkable happened. Instead of fading from public attention, Terry's message became stronger than ever. People who had never met him felt personally connected to his story. Families discussed his courage around dinner tables. Schools organized fundraising campaigns. Communities came together to support cancer research in ways they never had before. Canadians understood that while Terry's legs could carry him no farther, his dream could continue through the actions of millions of others. Television networks organized a national fundraising event to support the cause that Terry had dedicated himself to. The response was extraordinary. Donations poured in from every corner of the country. Children donated their savings. Businesses contributed large sums of money. Ordinary citizens gave whatever they could afford. By February 1981, Terry's original goal of raising $1 for every Canadian had been achieved. More than $24 million had been raised for cancer research. An incredible accomplishment that exceeded what many people thought possible when the Marathon of Hope first began. Throughout this period, Terry continued receiving treatment and fighting the disease with the same determination that had defined his entire life. He remained hopeful and focused on the future. But the cancer had spread aggressively. Despite the efforts of doctors and the support of an entire nation, his health continued to decline. On June 28, 1981, Terry Fox passed away at the age of 22. Canada mourned the loss of a young man who had become a symbol of courage, perseverance, and selflessness. Flags were lowered. News programs across the country honored his life. Millions of people felt as though they had lost someone they personally knew. Yet even in death, Terry's impact did not end. In many ways, it was only beginning. The Marathon of Hope inspired the creation of the annual Terry Fox Run, an event that continues to take place around the world. Millions of participants have joined these runs over the decades, raising funds for cancer research and keeping Terry's mission alive. The money raised through Terry Fox events has now reached hundreds of millions of dollars and continues supporting scientific discoveries, that save lives. More importantly, Terry's story continues to inspire people facing challenges of every kind. His journey reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep moving forward, despite fear. It reminds us that one person, armed with determination and purpose, can inspire an entire nation and leave a legacy that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. And that is why, more than 40 years later, Terry Fox is still running in the hearts of millions. When people think about heroes, they often imagine powerful leaders, famous athletes, or individuals who achieved extraordinary success. Terry Fox was different. He never conquered nations, built great fortunes, or held positions of power. What made him extraordinary was something far more important. He showed the world what one determined person can accomplish when driven by purpose, courage, and compassion. Terry's journey across Canada lasted only a few months, but its impact has lasted for generations. Every year, millions of people continue to participate in Terry Fox runs around the world. Children who were not even born when he lived learn his story in schools. Cancer researchers continue benefiting from the funds raised through the movement he inspired. Most importantly, people facing their own challenges continue finding strength in his example. Terry Fox proved that even when circumstances seem impossible, the human spirit can achieve remarkable things. He lost a leg, but he refused to lose hope. He faced cancer, but he refused to let cancer define his life. He encountered obstacles that would have stopped most people, yet he continued moving forward one step at a time. His story reminds us that true greatness is not measured by what we gain for ourselves, but by what we do for others. More than 4 decades after the Marathon of Hope began, Terry's dream continues to live on. His footsteps may have ended on a highway near Thunder Bay, but the movement he created never stopped running. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson of all. One person may not be able to change the entire world overnight, but one person can inspire millions of others to try. Thank you for listening to the remarkable story of Terry Fox, one of Canada's greatest heroes, and a symbol of hope whose legacy continues to inspire people around the world today.